Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here, coming to you one day before the British Columbia provincial election, probably one of the wildest elections any of us in Canada have witnessed in a long time. And I urge you, if you live in BC and you haven't already voted, you have to vote on election day tomorrow. It's going to be a torrential downpour, I've heard, across most of the lower mainland. Please tough it out because I know the NDP voters won't. This, again, has been an absolutely wild race. It's going to be tight this election because there is so much money on the NDP side to push out their voters, even if most of the general public doesn't like the NDP anymore. They can still put up a tough fight. But remember where this race started. In January, you would have polls in BC saying that the BC NDP were leading by 28%. They were leading the next closest party by 28%. And now we are in a race where, depending on the pollster, they are either down significantly or barely up on the Conservatives. And I think it's telling that Main Street Research, which has had the Conservatives leading for about the last 10 days or so by anywhere from 1 point all the way up to 5 points, they in fact even have the Conservatives today leading by 5 points, that the rest of the pollsters who had the NDP up last week by 5 points, they've significantly tightened. I think I was saying the names combined. Either it was Polera or Palace, who last week had the NDP up 5. Now just throw out a poll saying 1. They're only up by 1. Leger, that had the NDP up 5, only say about 3.5 now. And I think this is what you call herding at the end of an election. It doesn't look great for the NDP. They could still win. Maybe their votes are more efficient. They lose the popular vote, but they won on seats. But I think that a lot of the pollsters realize that their polls for the NDP might have been a little bit too hawkish. And so what you do is you herd towards the mean, and the mean has been more towards Main Street's +5s for the Conservatives. So to not look silly by having it be a Conservative blowout, say it's basically a tie like Palace just did. Maybe that's legitimately what their poll said, but that's kind of how it works. But in the last few days of the BC provincial election, I think there has been a significant difference in the energy levels between the two parties. John Rustad finished off last night speaking in front of 2,000 people in a banquet hall in Surrey, and David Eby apparently was in Surrey earlier in the day doing some, I guess, campaign office visits, and then ran back to Yaletown. I believe a riding that's probably not even going to be won by the BC NDP, to do this rally where they had one of the communications directors for BC United say, I took out a BC NDP membership so I could vote for them on election day, which somebody should tell him that you actually don't need to buy a membership to vote in these elections. But this was the contrast last night. And one person could say, like, well, maybe Eby had another rally on another day that was equally as big. In the last week, you got to be having massive events, or it's a big waste of time. The only thing a leader does on the last day is rallies volunteers to go door knocking, or they do big rallies. That is it. And it seems like David Eby's organization has just run out of gas. I don't think they know where they need to go in the province that's most effective for them. They've been keeping a lot of their time all kind of bottled up in Surrey, going back to Vancouver ridings that I've seen where there's no chance they're going to lose some of these areas, but they're just for some reason, David Eby's like puttering around in ridings where the NDP should be winning by 10, 15%. Most of the remaining race in BC, in terms of places that are toss-ups or undecided, we don't know where they're going to go, is not actually in Surrey. Southern Surrey could go significantly Conservative, but the real path to victory, at least in my mind, is through Maple Ridge, Coquitlam. Port Moody actually could go Conservative. The demographics in that riding are set up to be more conservative. And maybe I can show you a little bit, or maybe I won't show it on screen because I don't want to show all of Main Street's data everywhere. But in this last day, the last day poll that Main Street just released shows that there is a lead for the BC Conservatives among all income brackets. People making 50,000 and less, 51,000 and 75,000, I think 75 to 100, and then 100 plus. Those groups are all going Conservative, whether it's just by 1% margin over the NDP, all the way up to 12% lead. And even the university-educated bachelor degree holders who usually go more BC NDP have also tightened up with the Conservatives. But the Conservatives, I hate when my videos jump scare me by auto-playing. But the biggest lead the conservatives have, and I think it's the real divide in British Columbia. It's between the people who have sociology degrees and the people who are, have trade degrees in plumbing, like they're electricians, whatnot. They went to a trade school or college. Those people are voting for the conservatives over the NDP by a margin of 20%. The conservatives have a 20% lead with people who work in trades, went to trade colleges, all that sort of thing. That's insane. High school or less also has a big lead, a big 11-point lead for the conservatives. And what you even have to know about the polls, even the polls that are showing the conservatives up, even those tend to have a little bit more of an NDP bias. Again, as I've been saying throughout a lot of these videos, teachers, plumbers, electricians, restaurateurs, small business owners, a lot of these types of people don't answer polls. Who's going to, even if it's a 5-minute IVR poll, none of these people in the middle of their day really have time to sit there listening to a robotic voice telling them what the questions are and what their answer options are. They don't have the time that like a public sector worker does, or student or retiree. And most retirees, in fact, when they do answer polls, it tends to be more NDP. But we know that the retiree group in general tends to actually be more conservative in their real voting patterns. So maybe the NDP wins. I think I ballpark this election to be a 75% chance the conservatives win, 25 for the NDP. And that 25 represents if there was a massive polling error, and maybe I'm just confused and everyone hates us. But I've been doing a lot of door knocking in a lot of different places. Ridings where we were significantly ahead, ridings where we were behind, and this is just based on models. Maybe we're technically ahead. And I found that universally, people like to see us. People want to talk to us. People like us. People like the plan. They don't like the NDP. It would be shocking to me that a lot of people show up to basically maintain this government as if it's done anything for them. Maybe media propaganda really works, and people say, "Oh, well, that conservative candidate said something I didn't like 9 years ago, and that's what's going to cause them to flip." But in general, I think the problems are too bad. There's homeless drug addicts dying on the streets, and somebody's going to get offended by a joke that a candidate made from the conservatives. It doesn't make sense to me. And also, this is why I think we're going to be picking up Richmond. Right now, the conservatives have, I think, about 55 to 60%, depending on if you add in undecideds or take them away, of the East Asian vote. That is the plurality of Richmond, is people who are Chinese, Korean, Japanese, and the conservatives are absolutely smashing that specific voting demographic. That's why I think Port Moody Burquitlam is in play, even though some models show the NDP winning it by 5 or 6 points. The problem is that riding is white and Asian, and those are two demographic groups that the BC Conservatives are in fact winning. And that's when Surrey becomes a big question mark, because South Asian people, probably smarter than the rest of us, don't take polls because polls are in fact a little bit annoying to take. So they just don't take polls. So in a poll of like 1,500 people, only 18 respondents are South Asian. So that really becomes the big question mark of Surrey. Do South Asians show up for the Conservatives? Do they show up for the NDP? Or do they stay home because they just don't want to get into it? Because you do get some communities where when it's a tight election, they don't want to be on the bad side of a party. They don't want to be blamed for this party winning and that party losing. So we're just going to sit home and not mess around too much. But now I just want to bring up this video because I think it is kind of representative of the attitude of the NDP. Does he work for the NDP in like a real way, like he's a campaign volunteer or he's like a strategist? No, but I think this is funny when you have NDP people going around vandalizing conservative signs.
Stop vandalizing windows. Stop vandalizing windows. This is private property. I have you on camera vandalizing windows. Not appropriate. Private property. You can't vandalize windows. You're entitled to your opinion. You're entitled to your opinion. You can't vandalize windows.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
You're entitled to your opinion. You can't vandalize windows.
Well, I'll face the consequences, unlike people that deny climate change.
Got it.
Well, unlike the people who deny climate change, I hope he wasn't implying there that if you like deny climate change, you should be like locked up or punished. Or I guess he's saying that they're not going to face the consequences because it's going to be future generations. Honestly, whenever I've had a door like slammed in my face or somebody was rude to me in one of these ridings I've been door knocking in. It's always this kind of like arrogant, I can do what I want kind of attitude. I always find those who consider themselves the most intelligent voters, the most compassionate, empathetic, they're always the shortest tempered. They're always the nastiest, the cattiest. They think that you're evil so they can do and say what they want to you. I rarely really see anything from the other side that shows that a conservative woman was or a conservative man was like rude to a door knocker. Sometimes happens. Obviously, there's cranks on every side, but I always find that when I can tell someone's hardcore NDP, it's never like, I'm voting NDP. I didn't like you guys doing this or that, or I believe in this policy. It's always like, I don't vote conservative. It's this bad attitude that this is BC. We vote NDP because we're smarter than you kind of a thing. Oh, we don't vote for far right conservatives. And that's it. And the thing is that I think it is demonstrative that if you watch a lot of mainstream media, you are the least educated voter, that you get the worst take on most of the current events in the province. I don't think that enough people who watch legacy media really know the extent to how bad the healthcare system is in this province, how much like wealth flight is taking place because of high tax and regulations. We lost 70,000 people last year to other provinces and the US because of just how hard it is to operate a business in this province. And then David Eby arrogantly says, well, we had 150,000 people enter the province last year as well. Yeah, but they're not business owners. They're new people working low wage jobs. And you can't build a province on government jobs and minimum wage private sector work. You actually eventually need to lower people's taxes so they can invest in their own businesses. Oh, I don't know why I have to explain this. Like, you can't actually clean up crime by giving out welfare checks. It's not how it works. David Eby, in fact, has that insane quote where he says, I don't care if people spend their entire welfare check on crack cocaine. That's their right. And that really is something that sums up David Eby's entire tenure as premier. It's just that, we just want to enable people in the worst possible behavior, and you're going to pay for it because you were nasty enough to actually build a business that's successful, so you owe us now half your income. And this is why I've told to people multiple times I usually find funny. I said that BC, it's the provincial slogan of British Columbia under the NDP might as well be, are you supposed to be doing that? Who told you can do that? There's constantly just forms you have to file, people jumping in the way of anything you're trying to do. Trying to build a building in BC is impossible because there's so many extra inspections you have to do. There's so many extra codes and labor issues you have to deal with in order to get anything done. There's a reason why it's easier to build in Alberta. And people will be like, well, housing costs a lot everywhere. Yeah, but you guys are the worst for a reason. I even had a guy yesterday, and I get his point. He says, well, things in the province aren't that bad because things are starting to come back. Wages are starting to go up again. The economy's starting to get going. I'm like, yeah, on a macro level, the Canadian national economy and the world economy tends to move in the same direction. Just because you couldn't possibly have a good economy south of the border that doesn't even somewhat rub off on British Columbia. But if you look at BC compared to Alberta, compared to Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Ontario, BC is the one lagging behind on growth. We lost 18,000 jobs in September. It's not really coming back. We're just kind of being lifted up by the success of others at this point. Anyways, that's it for me today. Maybe actually before I go here, I will show you guys at least the model from today's polling. I'll show you it with the undecided still added in because there's a few people who might be able to make up their minds in the last day here. But we're down all the way down to just 5% of people are undecided, which really shows you how undecided this race used to be. Because at the start, like 15 days ago, or 20 days ago, it was common to see up to 17% of people undecided. Now it's just 5. We have the Conservatives leading with 43% of the vote, the NDP at 38, and the Greens at 11, and then another party is 4. I actually think another party are going to be a lot of BC Conservative voters just not wanting to say it because there is so much aggression against the Conservatives that you are going to find that silent Conservative voter. It actually happens in the US with Donald Trump. When the media goes so hard after people for voting for a candidate that you're a bad person, you must be racist, you must be this, that, whatever, that some people start to stop wanting to tell anyone their opinion. They're going to vote Conservative, but they're going to tell pollsters either something different, or they're going to say another party, or they're just not going to answer the call because I don't want to deal with it. And so I think there is going to be a silent majority of people who are going to show up this election and put the Conservatives over the top because last election in 2020, early voting had about 671,000 people vote. And that was a COVID election where there was a lot of incentive for some people who were very COVID paranoid to show up and vote when the lines were a bit shorter, a little bit more sparsely populated. So, but this election, we have a million people, specifically 1,001,000 people who voted early. And it sounds like there's still a lot more people who are going to be showing up and voting tomorrow. In fact, when you actually poll people on who haven't voted yet, it looks like the Conservatives at least have a slight edge with early voting. When you ask people, are you certain to vote? Those who have not voted, the certain to vote category, the Conservatives are leading by 12%. And then the likely to vote category, the NDP are a little bit more neck and neck. And then the unlikely to vote category, the NDP are leading the Conservatives. So, like I was saying a few weeks ago, the thing that the NDP lead most on inside their base is crushing apathy. People don't run out of the house and vote to maintain a government. They run out of the house and vote for change. Low turnout elections tend to maintain governments because it's the supporters of that government, the people who vote frequently, who generally are pretty plugged in and know how like the state of the province. They show up in low turnout elections and they tend to re-elect governments they think are doing a good job. High turnout is when people are dissatisfied. Nobody is so satisfied that they just want to go and vote in order to let the guys know. That doesn't really happen. Low turnout always means generally satisfied or some other random factor. High turnout means we're ticked off, and I do think that this electorate's ticked off. I've gone to ridings again where we're supposedly trailing by 8-9 points, and I go to the NDP polls in those areas, the polls that the NDP, even if they won the riding last time by 50%, 55%, that this is their poll where they got 75% of the vote. It's like a 50-50 down those streets. I'm talking to every single house, and it's very up in the air. People are not hot on the NDP, even in their traditionally voting neighborhoods for the NDP. So, anyways, that should be it for me today, guys. Again, go and vote. If you can't vote tomorrow, I believe you can go to a returning office in your riding, and they let you basically just write in who you're going to vote for without having to do advanced or day of. So, if you can't go tomorrow, go to your returning office, vote there, make sure all your kids voted, make sure your parents voted, make sure your friends voted, because it's not really like an election where you're going to be like, well, I don't want to ask her who she voted for. Oh my goodness, save yourself several thousands of dollars in taxes and make sure that they voted Conservative so we actually can like save the province and whatnot. I'm about to go door knocking. Have a good one, everyone. If you want to support the show, you can donate in the description below at the Give, Send, Go link for the legal fund, which I also have pinned at the top of the comments. See you guys later. I promise to get a haircut after the election.